Okay. The Maamar says like this, Posach Rabbi Shimon Maamar, it says in the Zayar that Rabbi Shimon opened up and said, Ani l'daidi va'alai tshukasei. The Posach says in Shir HaShirim, I am to my beloved, and upon me is the desire for him, or is his desire. Kol said Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Kol yoymin diskatarna b'aya alma, all the days that I was attached in this world. Bechad ketira eskatarna be'bekutchabrichu, with one knot I was knotted to the Eibishter. Uvegin kach hashta v'alai tshukasei, and because of that, now upon me is his desire. And in the continuation, meaning now on the day of my passing, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying on Lag B'Omer. And in the continuation of the Inyan and the Zayar, it says like this: Rabbi Shimon said, every day I would look at this pasuk. It says in the Eibishter, my soul will rejoice. Now the entire pasuk was fulfilled in me, because my neshama in the Eibishter, it's unified. In the Eibishter, it's inflamed, it's passionate. In the Eibishter, it's connected. What does that mean? Says the Rabbi, that throughout all the days of his life, all the days that I was connected in this world, the Rashbi was connected to the Eibishter is katarno lashon kesher, because the word is katarnas, the word knotted, like the pasuk she tied on his hand a red string. So the Targum uses the word katar. This what does this kashrus mean? Yes, it's a very deep knot, a bond, but it's two separate things, two things that are bonded, that are tied together. But now on the day of his passing, right now Reb Shimon reached an even higher level, that he's now connected, he's one, not just connected, not just tied and bound to the Eibishter, but Be'achida, he's one with the Eibishter. So what are these different levels of being tied to the Eibishter, bound to the Eibishter? Hiskashrus and achtus. Now, even though we're saying that this level of Be'achida, of being completely one with the Eibishter, he reached only on the day of his Istalkos, since all of his life he was working on reaching this level. As we said, every day I would look at this pasuk, Muvan, that's understood, that in general, Rashbi it relates to this level of Achdus, and he reached it even throughout all of his life. Just the shleimus, the perfection of it, the entire pasuk, that's being fulfilled only now on the day of his Istalkos. As the Rebbe Rashab explains in Samach Vav, that it says about Rashbi, that his whole life was in a manner of Teiras Yom-Nasi, that Teira was his entire craft. In other words, therefore it has the halachic difference of his other responsibilities for mitzvahs and for davening and so on, because Teiras Yom-Nasi, Teira was his whole involvement. So the Rebbe Rashab explains that what does it mean, the Teiras Yom-Nasi, that the way in which Rashbi was involved in Teira was in a manner of Amshachas Ma'im Duchrin, of drawing down in a Surus Leila, an awakening from above, not like all the other Tanoim, that the way in which they learned Torah was elevating literally the female waters, feminine waters, in other words, an awakening from below. But Rashbi was learning Torah in a way that it's being drawn down, it's Sarus Leila, the way it's drawn down from above. And that says the Rabbi Rashab, he explains that this idea that Rashbi's Torah was on a different level than the other Tanoim, because his Torah was his Sarus Leila, that's the idea of Be'achida Be'lihita, that he's one with the Eibishter, that he's inflamed, he's passionate for the Eibishter. So if it says the Rebbe, if the Rebbe Rashab is explaining the term Be'achida Be'lihita, as relating to the fact that Rashbi was Teirasi Umnasei, that proves that it's not something that applied only on the day of his Istalkos, because Teirasi Umnasei was the reality his whole life. So therefore, this idea of Be'achida Be'elahita must also relate to Rashbi the way he is all his life. Just the shleimus, the perfection of it, he reached on the day of his Istalkos. And you could add, in many of the Maamarim, it brings this the last concept, the concept that Rashbi said on the day of his Talkos of Be'achida, connected to the first statement of Bechad Ktira Es Katarna, that I was bound up in one knot, even though the Rashbi said one knot was about all of his life, and Be'achida he said about the day of his Talkos, because this that Rashbi said that all my life with one knot I was bound up, I was knotted up with the Eibishter. Bepnimius, that includes already the perfection of Be'achida, of the complete Achdus. But all of his life, that level of Be'achida wasn't revealed. What was revealed was being knotted to the Eibishter, bound to the Eibishter, which means it's still two things, just that are connected to one another. On the day he passed away, that on the day of a tzaddik's passing, then there's revealed the true pnimius, the root, the source of all the aveda that he did throughout, that the person did throughout all the days of his life. So then there was revealed the true pnimius of this iskashrus that he had all of his life, that then it was revealed that really it wasn't just the level of iskashrus, but he reached also the level of be'achida, of achdus with Eibishter. Okay, so Bekitzer, what we said is all of Rashbi's life, he had his kashrus to the Eibishter, but on the day of his passing, he reached the level of Be'achida, Be'lehita, of complete oneness with the Eibishter. But the fact that he reached that on the day of his Istalkos means that was really his Aveda all of his life too. Just the pnimius of it, the pnimius of B'chad K'tiras Katarna, of the kashrus that he reached throughout all of his life, when that was revealed, the pnimius of that was really Achdus, and that was revealed on the day of his Stalkos. So to understand a little bit better, what are these different levels? The level of Iskashrus and the level of Achdus. We'll understand this with the introduction of this, that we know Shagam Iskashrus l'mayla b'dveikus. Before getting into the difference between Achdus and Iskashrus, the Rebbe, and why the pnimius of Iskashrus is really Achdus, the Rebbe says first we have to introduce a different level. There's a lower level than Iskashrus, which is dveikus, being attached. So there's attached, there's being bound, and then there's being one. What does that mean? What's the difference between dveikus and iskashrus, attachment, and being bound? The dveikus is something that's only external. The Posach says as the belt sticks to the person or is attached to the person's waist, to the person's thighs, the attachment of the belt to the person is only to the chitzenius of the person. So dveikus is an external thing. Hiskashrus upepnimius, being tied, being bound, isn't just like attachment, but that's bepnimius nafshik shura benafshe shezemagia bepnimius, like it says about Yaakov with Binyamin, that his soul is bound up in his soul. In other words, that this is something that reaches not just the chitzenius of the person, but the pnimius. V'zeu achiluk ben karbanis l'kteides. This difference between dveikus and hiskashrus is the difference between karbanis and kteides. Avedas HaKarbanis Mitzad Zesh Yisrael Dvukim BaKadosh Baruch Hu Kedisa BeMedrash of Zayar. It says in Medrash and in Zayar that what are the Karbanis? The Karbanis come because the Yidden are attached to the Eibishter. Ulachena Yimakriv MaKarbanis Al Mizbeach HaChitzin, because Karbanis are only expressing the level of attachment, which, as we said, is Bechitzenius. Therefore, where were the Karbanis brought? On the outer Mizbeach. The Benefesh Adam Uchitzenius Alev, in the person's nefesh, that refers to the Chitzenius of the heart, because because we're talking about a chitzenistic level of dveikos, of attachment. K'teres uloshin kesher, but k'teres is in the word kesher, like we said before. T'chol kesher shebapasuk meturgum keter. That every kesher, every knot in the pasuk is the targum is keter. So k'teres comes from the word a bond tied up in, knotted up in. Ulachein k'teres yamez be'achapnimi, because k'teres is the level of iskashus, not just dveikos like the karbanis. Therefore, the k'teres was brought in the inner mizbeach, the benefesh adam u'pnimis alev, which is in a person's nefesh. That's a reference to the pnimis of the heart. What's the difference, Taka, between the dveikus and iskashros? What's the difference between serving the Eibishter with the chitzenius alev, chitzenius of the heart, and the aved of pnimius of the heart? Shaved the chitzenius alev yapitam v'das. The aved of chitzenius alev means that you're approaching it in a rational fashion based on what you understand. The ba'av shapitam v'das shaykh shinuyim, and by very nature, love that's based on understanding, on comprehension, on reason, it's possible to change, because the greater the understanding, the greater will be the love. And if the understanding changes, there'll be a diminishing in the love. But the Aveda, person who's serving the Eibishter from the Pnimius of the heart, that means he's serving him beyond Tam Vedas, and in that there's not Shaykh any changes. So that again is why karbanis, not only is karbanis dveikus and chitzenis in mizbeach hachitzen, but it's also the word karban comes from the word kirov, to bring close, whereas keteris comes from the word iskashros, to be tied up in. The kirov meidashu mitzias elushu karav lelikus. What does closeness imply? That he's a separate entity. He's just close to elikus. So the person is the person, but he's close to elikus. But something that's close could also become far, because it's not bound up in. But iskashros means a knot, keteres, and that's a lasting knot. The true meaning of a lasting knot is not just that it lasts, but that it's not possible for it not to last, that it's not possible for it to change. Okay, so Bekitzer in Eis Beis, what he explained is the difference between, yes, we were talking in Eis Aleph about Achtos and Iskashrus, but before we could get to Achtos and Iskashrus, there's Iskashrus and lower than it, Dveikus. Dveikus means an external attachment, and two things that are connected, that are attached, but only externally, and that relates to Karbanis, which is the Aveda of Chitzenius Alev, and it's Mizbeach HaChitzin. And that represents, it comes from the word kirov, which means it's an aveda al pitam v'das, and therefore it's possible for it to change. Whereas hiskashrus is keteres in the word kesher, kesher, which is a bond, a true bond. It's knotted up. It's not shaykh to shinui, and that's in the mizbeach hapnimi, because it represents an aveda that's higher than tam v'das, and therefore that can't change. Now, this difference that we're saying between dveikus and iskashros, they're both in Aveda. In other words, they're both in a person's turning to the Eibishter from below to above. The karbanis ukteris shnei mamod Aveda, because both karbanis and keteris are both within the pillar of Aveda. Teira Aveda milas chasadim within Aveda. Shi Allah mamata l'mayla. In general, the kav of Aveda, the direction of Aveda, is from below to above. You're elevating the world and elevating to the Eibishter. V'achiluk ben dveikus v'iskashros bin yinam shachom amayla l'mata teira milas chasadim. So that's the difference between dveikus and iskashros. The way it is in mamata l'mayla will be the difference between karbanis and keteris. What about the difference between dveikus and iskashros in the hamshacha, that you draw mamayla l'mata from above to below, in the other two kavim of teira milas chasadim? So that we'll see also that there's a difference. Kedisa b'zayar, like it says in Zayar, kama chaviv in Yisrael, kama kutchabrichu chulu. How dear are the yidden to the Eibishter? The Eibishter wants to connect with us and to be bound with us, to be attached to the Yidden and to be bound to them. The Rabbi explains the listapkabu al yidei mitzvahs. So the listapkabu and liskashri imain, the dveikus and iskashros, the attachment and being bound and being connected, are two different levels, are achieved through two different things. The dveikus is through the mitzvahs. the amshacha that you draw down from above through mitzvahs is a makiftika one, is an encompassing one. Like it says, that his right hand will hug me. That's a reference to the mitzvahs as we express it in lulav and sukkah and tefillin and so on. When a person does a mitzvah, the light of the Eibishter that he draws down through that mitzvah hugs the person that fulfills the mitzvah, but a hug is from the outside. That's why he uses the term of dveikus, of attachment, because attachment is an external connection. But to be knotted, to be bound and connected with him, that's achieved through Torah. The because the hamshacha that Torah draws down is brought into the person b'pnimius. Like it says, your Torah is within my intestines. In other words, we take the Torah and digest it. We take it into us and it becomes damu basar kibsare. And that's why he uses the term to be bound with them. Because iskashrus references an internal connection, and the connection that's achieved between the Eibishter and the Yidden through Torah. The attachment that's achieved between the Eibishter and the Yidden through Torah isn't just Vekas, it's iskashrus. Maamar, like it says, las ksharinin and miskashrin dabida. There's three knots that are knotted one to the other. Kuchabricho erais of Yisrael, the Yidden, the Torah, and the Eibishter, which means that the connection through Torah is an actual miskashrin dabida, is an actual knot, is an actual bond of iskashrus, not just Vekas, a pneumistic connection. Okay, so B'kitzer, we said that the difference between dveikus and iskashrus of karbanis and keteres, that's in terms of the aveda that the person's doing. In terms of the amshacha from above, dveikus will be mitzvahs, and iskashrus is Torah. Because the that's drawn down, the amshacha that's drawn down through mitzvahs is an external attachment, is a makiftika thing, whereas the iskashrus that's created through Torah is bepnimius, and therefore it's miskashroin dabida. It's the knots that knots the yidden to the Eibishter, not just attaches. It says one second, there's more to this. Even before we get to this kashrus, which we still need to get to what that means in terms of achtos, within dveikus itself, there's also two different levels. The attachment that you can have to the Eibishter, which gives us the ability to bring the karbanis, there's also two different levels. In the Medrash, it says that the reason why the Eibishter tells Yidden to bring karbanis is because we're attached to him. As it quotes the pasuk that we quoted before, as the belt attaches to the thighs of the person. But in the Zayar it says, meritorious are the Yidden that the Eibishter calls them Adam, as it says in the pasuk, Adam ki akriv mikem. Right, when by karbanis it's called the Yidden Adam. My time a karalain Adam mishum diksivat madveke bavaya lekechem. Why are we being called Adam from Adam el Elyon? Because it says vat madvekim, that we're attached to the Eibishter. Okay, so you have the level of attachment in karbanis that allows for karbanis, the way the Medrash says it, and the way the Zayar says it. So the Rebbe Rashab explains in Samach Vav that it's talking about two different levels of dveikus. Shebe Medrash medaber binyan dveikus to kelim, shakelim in bechinas mitzios vayichot dveikus shalem ina yichot atzmi. In the Medrash, as it quotes the pasuk about a belt, it's talking about the attachment of kalim. Kalim by nature exist as a separate entity, and therefore, while they could be attached to the yichud, the attachment that they have, isn't that essentially they're attached because their essential existence is a separate existence. That's why the Medrash brings the pasuk about the belt, because the belt is its own mitzias, it's just attached to the person, but it remains a separate entity essentially. But in the Zayar, it's talking about the attachment that the has to its source. By its very nature is a revelation of the Mar. So therefore, the attachment isn't a secondary and external thing that it's going against its nature, but its very nature it's to be attached. Because the whole existence of the is a revelation of the Mar. So essentially, what it is attached to the source. Dveikos mamish therefore brings the pasuk of you were connected, were attached to the Eibishter, your God. In other words, it's an actual dveikos, not just a chitzenistic dveikos. So basically, we're saying that there's two different levels of dveikus. The dveikus of Chitzenius can 1 second. If that's the case, if we're talking about an essential dveikus, so why are we calling it dveikus? We just explained in the last days that when it's bepnimius, it's not just dveikus, it's iskashros. So why are we saying that the dveikus of Eris is still called dveikus, is still called just attachment, which by its very definition is an external attachment? He says, yeah, its very nature is to be connected, attached to the makar, but also the nature of is not within the etzem itself. It's a revelation. It's an expression. It's a spread outside of the etzem. So if it's a spread outside of the etzem, that means that it's no longer a pnimistic connection. It's a yichud. It's a dveikos atzmi, a yichud atzmi. It's essential to what the is, that it's attached to the makar, but it's only attached. It's still something separate. It's not bound up with. It's no longer one thing. Okay, so that means that now we've explained that before you get to Iskashros, in Dveikus itself, there's two levels of Dveikus. There's the Pnimistic, Chitzenistic Dveikus of the Dveikus of Kalim, that the essence of what it is a separate entity, and then there's the more essential or Pnimistic Dveikus, but it's still external, which is the Dveikus of that its very nature is to be connected to the Makar, but it's still no longer in the makar. So it's an expression outside of the makar. It's separated from the makar, but its nature is to be attached. It's an yichud atzmi. It's the dveikus is an atzmistic dveikus. It's an essential attachment. And that's within attachment. Now there's the two levels of something that's only a chitzenistic dveikus, that it's not a yichud atzmi, it's not essentially attached to it, and then something that's the dveikus of which is a pnimistic or an essential, an atzmistic dveikus. Now, even though we said before that mitzvahs will be dveikus and Torah, the hamshacha through Torah is iskashros, but we know that Torah and mitzvahs are similar to the idea of and keli. So if that's the case, yesh leimar shegam achibra shalidei sekatera k'maisha Torah b'bchinis ispashtos v'gilui b'chlal inyan dveikus. If that's the case, learning Torah must have in it two levels, because there's an element, there's a connection that could come through learning Torah. If you're learning Torah the way it is, like ispashtos v'gilui, that it's no longer the essence, but it's expression of the essence. It's a revelation of the essence, but it's come outside the original source. So the attachment that's being achieved through learning Torah is also included. Bechlal inyan dveikus is also included in the level of dveikus. We said before that Torah brings to iskashros inyan iskashros shalidei sekatera the iskro miskashrim beirais averais mekutzim. This idea that we said before, that through learning Torah the person achieves iskashros, a bond, is knotted up with the Torah, and the Torah is knotted up with the Eibishter. That won't be achieved through Eisek Torah, through learning Torah, when you're relating to the Torah the way it is an expression and a revelation. That's only going to achieve dveikus, the higher level of dveikus, the dveikus that's a yichud atzmi, whereas limadat Torah that achieves iskashros is only when you're learning Torah, when you're relating to Torah, to the essence of the Torah that's beyond revelation, beyond expression. So how do we understand this idea that there's two levels in Torah itself? Torah that's the higher level of dveikus, and Torah that's the level of iskashros. Yovan Zalpia Yadua, so we'll understand this based on what we know. Yeah, we said that there's three knots, that knot, the Yid and the Torah, the Eibishter together, but there's two ways that could happen. If you're looking at Torah the way it is drawn down into this world, came down from a high place to a low place, so it's drawn into Seder Ishtalshlos. The order in Hishtalshlos is that you're dealing with a structure. That the nature is that the chitzenius of each level becomes the pnimius of the next level. So the outer part of the higher level becomes the inner part of the lower level, and so on. If that's the case, how are Yidden connected to the Torah and Torah connected to the Eibishter? It'll be that the chitzenius of each of the higher one will be connected to the pnimius of the lower one. So if an eskashtus Yisrael beiraisa, then the way that the Yidden are going to be connected to the Torah is that the inner essence of the Yid of Yisrael is connected to the revealed part of the chitzenius of the Torah. In other words, the lower part of Torah connects to the higher part of the Yid. And the same thing will be true of the next step, that it's not that the same thing that the Yidden are already knotted up with the Eibishter, but rather the higher level, the secret part, the pnimius of the Torah will be connected to the revealed aspect, so to speak, of the Eibishter. That means that if you're going about it in this manner, that Taka Yidden are connected to Torah and Torah is connected to the Eibishter. But what that means is that the inner aspect of the Yid is connected to the outer aspect of the Torah, and the outer aspect of the Torah, the inner aspect of the Torah is connected to the outer aspect of the Eibishter. If that's the case, if you're looking at the revealed part of the Yid, the lowest link of the part of the chain, the outer part of the lowest link, with the inner dimension of the Eibishter, meaning the highest part, the highest element of the highest link, will only be achieved through several intermediaries, through several steps in between. Because there's the Sasim the Yisrael, the outer dimension of the Yid is connected with the inner dimension of the Yid, which in turn is connected to the Galia Deiraisa, to the revealed part of the Torah, which in turn is connected to the Sasim Deiraisa, the inner dimension of the Torah, which in turn is connected to the Galia de Kuchabricho, to the revealed part of the Eibishter. That's when you're talking about the Torah, the way it comes down into Seder Ishtalshlos, the way we deal with it in this world, the way it's just a Gilui and Esvashtos. Avo mitzad etzem, and that's the Dveikus of Torah. Avo mitzad etzem, but when you deal with the essence of the Torah, Kamaishi l'mayla Ishtalshlos, the way it is beyond the whole Seder Ishtalshlos altogether, then it's not that one is connected to the next, which in turn is connected to the next, and so on, but rather Eskashtos the Yisrael b'Kuchabrichu. In that level, the bond, the knot between the Yidden and the Eibishter is not a Shagama Gali the Yisrael Miskasher Ba'asasim de Kuchabrichu B'Lima Mutzayim, that the lowest part is connected to the highest part. The revealed part of the Yid is connected to the innermost dimension of the Eibishter without any intermediaries. V'gam kishalei mit Galia de Teira ba'avanu v'asaga shalei, and even when the person's learning the revealed part of the Torah, he's learning Nigla in his own comprehension, in his own understanding. Umekusher gama Galia de nishmasei at la'avanu v'asaga shalei gam im sasim de kuchabrich deiraisa. He's connected, even the revealed part of his neshama, even his own comprehension is connected also with the secret part of the Eibishter. Val yadaim sasim de kuchabrich, and through it he's connected with the inner dimension of the Eibishter. So basically you have two modes of iskashnos of Torah. The lower level, which is Yisrael miskashnim beiraisa, veiraisa kuchabrichu, means that it's a series of steps that ultimately connect the Yid with the Eibishter, and that will be the way the Torah is behispashtos, is begili, the way the Torah comes down into Seder Ishtalshlos, and that's really the higher level within dveikus, within attachment still, and then there's there's the level where Yisrael that the Yid and the Torah and the Eibishter are all connected with one another and bound up with one another. That's the level of Iskashrus, the Etzem and the Torah, the way it is beyond Seder Ishtalshlus. V'yesh leimar she'Iskashrus Yisrael ve'Iraisa shemitzad dargas HaTorah kamei shenimshcha b'ishtalshlus nichleles b'inyan adveikus she b'chitzenis. So even though we said before, now he's explaining how we reconcile those two statements. That in Oiskim, we said that Torah is Iskashrus as opposed to mitzvahs, which is dveikus. But then we said at the beginning of this ice that in dveikus itself there's two levels, and there's a level of Torah that's still only in the level of dveikus. So he said, because we just explained two levels of Iskashrus in Torah, the lower level of Iskashrus, the lower level of the bond between the Yid and the Torah, that comes from the Torah, the way it is drawn down into Ishtalshlus, is included within the category of dveikus, which is chitzenistic attachment, not an inner bond. Why? Because the bond that the Yid is connecting with the Torah on this level, Torah, the way it comes down into Seder Ishtalshlus, the way he understands it in his Avon of Asaga, is only in the chitzenius, is only in the revealed aspect of Torah. Via Seder Mizu, and even more than that, Gama Pnimiya Shebechinezu, even the more pneumistic aspect of this level of the bond between the Yid and the Torah is only the way the Torah is drawn down into Ishtalshlus to be an intermediary between the Yid and the Eibishter. But the lashon that we said of three knots are knotted one to the other, meaning not dveikus but iskashrus, primarily relates to the way that to the way the Yid connects with the Torah mitzad, the essence of the Torah, the way it is beyond Hishtalshlus, the Iskashrus, Zui Besasim, the Iraisa, Besasim, the Kuchibricho, Pnimius, because that bond is in the inner dimension of the Torah, in the inner dimension of the Eibishter, Bepnimius, as we'll soon see. Okay, so the Kitzer in this case, he said that dveikus, there's two levels of dveikus also. There's the dveikus of the, before we said dveikus is mitzvahs and iskashrus is Torah. But then he says that dveikus is also two levels. There's the dveikus of mitzvahs, which is an external dveikus. But then there's a deeper dveikus, the dveikus of kalim. That's not a yichud atzmi. But then there's the yichud of the dveikus of eris, which is Torah, which is a yichud atzmi. How could we say that Torah is dveikus if we said before Torah is iskashrus? So he said because there's two levels in Torah also. There's the level of Torah that relates to the Torah, the way it comes down into Seder Ishtalshlus, and that's dveikus because the iskashrus of the Yid is to the Torah, and of the Torah is to the Eibishter. In other words, there's multiple steps, and therefore that's a chitzenistic connection ultimately, and that's included within the level of dveikus. Whereas when a person connects to the Torah the way it is in the Etzem HaTorah, the essence of Torah the way it is higher than Seder Ishtalshlus, that's when he achieves true Iskashrus, that it's Tlas Ksharim Iskashroin Da Bida, as we'll explain. I say, because really, if you think about it, the term Tlas Ksharim Miskashroin Da Bida doesn't seem to make sense. What are the three knots? There's three things bound to each other. It's just two knots, A to B and B to C. So what's the three knots? So he says, because in Hiskashrus also there's Vihinegam Hiskashrus Shemitzat that's Matera, even the Hiskashrus that's being achieved from the essence of the Torah, Yisrael Ve'iraisa V'chein Eiraisa V'kuchibricho. Still, the Yidden and the Torah and the Eibishter are still two separate things. It's not yet the level of Beyachida, it's still just the level of Iskashrus, that it's still two separate things that are being tied one to another. Mashenke, but then there's another level, which is Mashenke, when we don't say Tlas Ksharim Iskashroin Dabida, Yisrael Beiraisa Veiraisa B'Kuchibrichu, but rather Yisrael Beiraisa of Kuchabrichu Kulachad. That's Lamaila Miskashrus Yisrael Leiraisa of Kuchabrichu. Kamaisha Mitzad, that's Matera. Shalamaila Miskashrus Mishtalshlus. That's the level of Achdus of Be'achida that's higher even than the Iskashrus of the Yidden and the Teira and the Eibishter that comes from the Etzema Teira that's higher than Ishtalshlus. Why? How could there be two different levels of Iskashrus? Iskashrus that's still of Teira, that's already the Etzema Teira that's beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, but still that's just going to be Iskashrus and not Kulachad. And then there's an even higher level of Kulachads. V'Yuvan will understand this Bahaktam Adiyok with the introduction first of another Diyok. V'Masha Amru Tlas Ksharin Inu Miskashran Da B'da. This that it says that there's three knots that are knotted one to another. Theoretically, there's only two knots. Yidden are knotted to the Teira. Teira is knotted to the Eibishter. So where's the third knot? So one of the explanations is the Kasher Ashlishi who Akasher the Yisrael v'Kuchabrichu Shalayayidiyam says the Teira. One of the explanations is that we're not saying that Yidden are knotted to Teira and Teira is knotted to the Eibishter, but rather it's a triangle, it's all a circle, it's all knotted one to another. In other words, the Yidden are also knotted to the Eibishter directly, not through Teira. Mitzad Sha'asherish the Yisrael Ba'atzmos, where does this bond come from? Because the root of Yidden is in Atzmos, Shalamayla Ma'asherish the Teira, which is higher than the source of Teira, and therefore Yidden are connected directly to Atzmos, even beyond the connection that the Teira is bringing them. How does that work? The order of these three knots will be like a ring, like a circle that doesn't have a beginning and an end. First there's a seder. First there's an order. Yidden are connected to Teira, and because the Teira is connected to the Eibishter, that's what's connecting the Yidden to the Eibishter through the Teira. But then once the Yidden connect to the Teira in that way, the the way it is higher than Ishtalshlus, that reveals Hakesher the Kuchabrichu Yisrael, that brings about the connection of the Yidden to the Eibishter. The Yeshleimer Shlach Rishi Yisrael Miskashrim Vayraisa Vayadam Kuchabrichu Misgala Hasherish the Yisrael Shalamaylam Hasherish the Teira Hakeshet the Yisrael V'Kuchabrichu. But what does that mean? Says the Rabbi. You could say that once Yidden connect to the Teira, and through the Teira they connect to the Eibishter, but our connection to the Eibishter is just through Teira, then is revealed the source of the Yid, which is higher even than the source of the Teira, and therefore we no longer need the connection to the Eibishter to be through the Teira. We have our own direct connection to the Eibishter, which is even higher than the connection that's achieved through Teira. After you create that second bond, the second knot, the knot that the Yidden have directly to the Eibishter, because there was revealed the shadish of the Yidden that's Mosherish and Atzmos, then it goes now in an opposite seder, because now the main bond is actually the bond that the Yidden have with the Eibishter directly. After you reveal the source of the Yidden the way it is in Atzmos, now it's not that Teira is achieving a connection for the Yidden with the Eibishter, it's fakert. Now that there's been revealed the connection that the Yidden have with the Eibishter in Atzmos, that's a connection that's even higher than the connection that the Teira has, and the Yidden through the learning Teira draw that down into the Teira as well. Like it says that Teira, that David HaMelech was crowning crowns to the Teira. What does that mean? So it says that he was connecting the Teira the way it is above to the Eibishter. In other words, now the Yid is revealing an even higher connection that the Teira has to the Eibishter beyond the connection that it naturally has. What does that mean? The natural connection that the Teira has to the Eibishter is that the Teira is the Eibishter's wisdom. But now, in addition to the fact that the Teira is the Eibishter's wisdom, Chachma is, after all, still a level. It's the highest of all the levels. It's Reishis, but it's still a particular level, and that's completely Bein Arech to Atzmos. So now the atzmos of Ein Sof, Yidden but are Moshe Shen atzmos, and therefore once Yidden reveal that connection, so now they draw into the Torah also from atzmos Ein Sof. Kivan shegam ba sherish the Torah v'Yisrael k'mei shem atzmos hasherish Yisrael l'mayla ma sherish the Torah. Even when you go to the way Torah is rooted in atzmos and Yidden are rooted in atzmos, the root of Yidden is still higher, right? But it says Savis b'nei Yisrael Yidden are higher. So the sherish of Yidden and atzmos is higher even than the sherish of Torah and atzmos. Therefore, when a Yid learns Torah, he's drawing into the Torah not just the connection that the Torah has to the Eibishter, and not just that it's Chachmasi Yisbarach, and not just the way Torah itself is Moshe Atzmos, but now there's drawn into the Torah the way the Yid is Moshe Atzmos, which is even higher. According to this, you could say that this that we're saying, that a Yid and the Torah and the Eibush, they're all one. Not only that they're bound one to another, they're tied one to another, they're mekusher one to another, but they're literally one. Primarily, this oneness is expressed in the Yid, even more so than it's expressed in Torah. When it comes to Torah, Mikivan Shatera Bishvil Yisrael, Daber B'nei Yisrael, Savitz B'nei Yisrael, Hainushi Dugmas Emtzai. He can Mitzias Davar Shmechuber B'Kosher Mekadosh Baruch Hu. The Torah is for the sake of the Yid. Like we said, Daber B'nei Yisrael, Savitz B'nei Yisrael, Torah talks about a Yid. That means that it's for the sake of the Yid, which means that to some extent it's a means to an end. It's an intermediary, which means that it's something separate on some level to some extent. It's bound to the Eibishter, but it exists for the sake of Yid, which means it has a separate existence than the Eibishter himself, and therefore it's something separate that's bound to the Eibishter. Mashenkin Yisrael Shem Mushrash Matzmas Mamish, but a Yid is literally rooted in Atzmas. And Zesh Yisrael Mushrash Matzmas ain't Zesh Mushrash Bayin in Acher Chas V'Shalom, Elas Shezeh Hasherish Yisrael Chadim Atzmas. You can't say Chas V'Shalom that there's something else connected to Atzmos, because Atzmos, there's only Atzmos. Which means that if Yidden are rooted in Atzmos, that means that they're one with Atzmos. There's nothing other than Atzmos. So the root of Yidden is nothing other than Atzmos. The root of Torah exists for a purpose. It has some existence, because it exists for the sake of the Yidden. The root of the Yidden is Atzmos. There's nothing else. So Yidden are taka truly one with Eibush, with Kutchabrichu. And then a Yid learns Torah, so they draw down that essence of the Eibush there into the Torah also, and that's what causes the Nasis Gama Torah Chadim Atzmos. That now Torah doesn't exist for something else, it's also one with Eibush there, one with the essence of the Eibush there. Yisrael, Eiraisav, Kutchabrichu, Kulachad. So through this, it becomes Yidden, Torah, and the Eibush are all one. Chad Mamish, literally one thing, not bound with one another, not tied to one another, but rather literally one thing. Okay, so what we explained, after we explained that there's a level of dveikus in Torah, then there's a level of hiskashrus in Torah, and on that level, Torah is what's connecting the Eibishter with the Yidden, but then there's a much higher level of hiskashrus, of connection, which is not just that it's hiskashrus, that they're separate things that are connecting to one another, but rather that Yisrael Eiraisav Kutchabrichu Kolachad, and that's expressed in the three knots. In other words, that it's all one circle, that they're connected one to another, not just the Yidden to Torah and Torah to the Eibishter, but also the Yidden to the Eibishter. And once Yidden are connected to the Eibishter, they reveal how they're one with the Eibishter, and then they reveal that oneness in the Torah also, so that ultimately you have not just Iskashrus, but you have complete Achdus Be'achida. So based on all of this, we could go back to the Maamar Azayar, Posach Reb Shimon. So according to this Yesh Levar, you could explain the Shnei and Yanim Shibarashbi, the two levels that we spoke about at the beginning of the Maamar and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. That on the one hand, all his life was Bechad Ktira Eskatarna, he's knotted with one knot with the Eibishter, Eskashtas the Eibishter. But on the day of his passing, he reached to Be'achida, and he reached the full expression of Be'achida, the fact that he was one with the Eibishter. Heim Shnei Efanim These are two different levels in the learning of Torah, which is because everything in Rabi is expressed in his learning of Torah, because Torah was his whole luminous. Yuvan, what are the two different levels in the Torah of Rabi? One that expresses the level of Iskashus, Pnimis, and the next that expresses the level of Achtos. So Yuvan will understand this up here. You do it based on what we know. This that we said before, that even when you're learning Nigla, which you're understanding in Avon of Hasaga, nonetheless there becomes a connection of the Eden to the essence of the Eibishter and the essence of the Torah. Hu behelim. Although that's true, but it's in a certain sense conceals the true revelation. When do you feel a full revelation of this essence of Torah and the essence of the Eibishter? When a person's learning Pnimis Torah. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, when he learned Nigla, there shined the Pnimius that he taught. Therefore, even when he was learning Nigla, he achieved the full hiskashrus, a full bond to the essence of the Torah and to the essence of the Eibishter. V'zeu shamar, and this is why he said, Kol yemidis katarna by alma, all the days that I was connected to this world, b'chad ktires katarna baby kuchibrichu, with one knot I was knotted to the Eibishter. In other words, even all his life when he was learning Torah, shagam limadan nigla shalei shabazahi reiv limuda, even his nigla, which was most of his learning, val derech zeh kol inyanav, and it's not just on his learning, because similarly everything else he did. Shayu chadurim b'Torah, because everything that he did was permeated with the Torah. Because the Torah was his primary craft. So therefore, even his nigla and even everything else he did, everything about the life of Rabi was in a manner of iskashras. It's not just veikos, it's not just attached to the Eibishter, like through mitzvahs or like through the lower level of learning Torah, because since in his Torah was revealed the Pnimius, so even all of his Torah and all of his life was iskashras, was bound to the Eibishter, but which is higher than veikos, b'chad ktires katarna, he was bound up, he was knotted up with one knot. But even more than that, through this he reached also the third knot. In other words, not just two knots that the Yid is knotted to the Torah and the Torah to the Eibishter, but the third knot, which is the Kesher, the Yisrael, the knot of the Yidden with the Eibishter, the bond of the Yidden with the Eibishter that comes from the essence of the soul, the way it's connected, the way it's bound up with the essence of the Eibishter. This is why he says, with one knot I was knotted. What does it mean, one knot I was knotted? What makes it one knot? The fact that it's not two. In other words, normally if a person's doing Aveda, so there's two kavim, there's Chesed and Gvura, there's Ava and Yira, it's essentially divided, right? Because everything in the world is divided. When do you have one? When do you have unity? Bechad Ktira Katarna, to be bound in one knot, when the person's doing the Aveda Mitzad the Yechida, which is completely beyond this Chalkos of two kavim. It's explained elsewhere, that in the level of Yechida, both Ava and Yira, both Chesed and Gvura are one Inyan. It's Chad Ktira, it's one knot. When a Yid is connected to the Eibishter through Torah, the two knots, since on that level Torah is like a means to an end, and therefore it's not completely truly one with the essence of the Eibishter. The level, the connection, the bond that the Yid achieves with the Eibishter through Torah, not just the lower level of Iskashras, which is really Dveikos, which is when a person's learning Torah, the way it is, the way it comes down Bishtalshlos, in Ishtalshlos, the way it comes down here. But even when a person's learning Torah, the way it is Mitzad Etzma Torah, so it's beyond Ishtalshlos, and therefore it's truly the level of Iskashras, not the level of Dveikos. The Yid is knotted up to the Eibishter through the Torah, but since it's through the Torah, it's still as if it's similar. It's expression of a connection, a bond of two separate things that are being connected, even though it's not truly separate. It's not truly two separate things, but it's like a connection, a bond of two separate things that are being connected, because the Torah is like an emtsai. Therefore, even the bond that it's connected that is achieved through learning Etzem HaTorah, the way it's beyond Ishtalshlos, will still be in such a way that there's a person who wants godliness. There's a Metzias, there's already a Metzias of a will, and a will by nature is already divided into two separate kavim of Chesed and Gvura, of Av and Yira. So the true level of being knotted with one knot, Kesher Echad, that it's only one knot, will be the higher level of Hiskashrus, which is the level of Dveika, of Achdus already, who Bekesher the Yisrael v'Kutchabrich will be expressed, not in the knot of Yidden with the Torah and through it with the Eibush there, but rather the third knot, which is the one knot, the knot of the Yidden with the Eibush there, which is beyond even the connection, the bond that's achieved through the means of Torah, which comes mitzad which comes from the fact that the root of the Yid is in Atzmos, and therefore he's truly one with Atzmos, and therefore he's truly one with Torah, and there is no separate things altogether. It's not really Hiskashrus, it's really Achdus. Based on all of this, we could say one second. If that's the case, then we're saying that he reached the level of his kashrus. Chad ktira is katarna is really already the level of be'achida. Before we said that his kashrus isn't quite be'achida, it's still his kashrus, and only on the day of his passing did he reach the full gilui, the full shleimus of be'achida, of being completely chad with the Eibishter, completely one with the Eibishter. So according to this, you could say, says the Rabbi, that he reached the shleimus of be'achida only on the day of his stalkus, not all his life. Because all of his life, his main focus was learning Torah. His main focus was Torah Siyum So therefore, even though he achieved the one knot, which means that really he was expressing the Etzem HaNeshama that's connected with the essence of the Eibush there, and through that with the essence of Torah. But nonetheless, since his primary focus was on learning Torah, so what you felt was as if there's two separate things being connected, because the focus was still on Torah, which doesn't have this level of oneness with the Eibush there by nature. But on the day of his istalkos, but on the day of his istalkos, the focus was no longer on Torah, and through it, on his connection to the Eibishter, the focus was on directly the essence of the Yid that's connected with the essence of the Eibishter, and therefore on the day of his istalkos was expressed no longer b'chat ktiras katarna, but rather nishmasi be'achida, that he was completely and totally one with the Eibishter. Now, even though that with one knot I was knotted, and for sure this level of be'achida, of being one with the Eibishter, is an extremely high level. Nonetheless, since Reb Shimon opened up and he said b'chat ktira, with one knot I was knotted, the Pirush Posach what does it mean that he opened? That he opened the pipeline. So through Reb Shimon opening the pipeline, now the kayach was given to every Yid, that there should be at least epizvas, a little bit, some edge, some tiny little bit of that, of that inyan. That the way the Yid learns Torah should be in such a manner that his soul is completely bound to the Torah with his entire pnimius. Even though there's times that he has to stop learning Torah. But nonetheless, at least while he's learning the limud Torah, should be his entire mitzius. Until he's literally one with the Torah, and literally one with the giver of the Torah, with the Eibishter. What gives us the ability to achieve this? It was through Posach Rabbi Shimon opening the pipeline. But even more so, it's when we learn Pnimis HaTeira, Rabi, which is the Teira of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Because through learning Pnimis HaTeira, that gives us even more so the Kayach. To be bound up with, to be tied, but even more so to be one with the Teira, with the giver of the Teira. And through learning and spreading the Teira of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That nowadays was revealed in the teachings of Chassidus. That also brings close to the Geula. Like Mashiach promised Baal Shem Tov. That when the well springs of Chassidus spread to the outside, that brings about Malka Mashiach, that brings Mashiach. Like it says in Zayr, like it says in Zayr, that with this chibur of yours of Rabi will go out of the Golus with mercy. So B'kitzer, and just want to note that teaching this Maamar, this entire project, is Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Michal, Akiva Gershon, Ben Rafal, Mנחem, נחum. Tonight is his birthday. Tomorrow is his yard sites, the day of his Aveda, of Kol Avidase Sha'avad by Meshach Kol Yimei Chayev, that definitely you saw the efforts, Kaseu V'Shemetz Menu, at least, of the connection of Rabi, of Teirasi, Nasei, and of connecting to the Teira, connecting through Pnimius HaTeira to the essence of the Teira, and B'chad Ktira Es Katarna, to become Be'achida. So may it be a schus for him, for us, to bring this connection, and most importantly, Yafkun Be'Migalusa Barachamim, to achieve the Dveikus, the lower level of Dveikus, the higher level of Dveikus, the lower level of Iskashrus, the higher level of Iskashrus, ultimately the Achtos with the Eibishter, and to be able to be reunited. V'kitzu v'rannu v'hu b'seicham. May we merit this immediately. Take of Miyad Mamish.